morning, everybody. Mestre Sukuri coming to you from Tokyo, Japan. Mestre Vibes, episode 54. Today, I'm using my pin mic, so I'm hoping that the volume and everything works out really well. First and foremost, it's mostly because I'm starting my day today, and I sometimes actually think better when I'm on my feet and moving around. I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that. So today, what I want to do is I want to talk about two things. One is really amazing, and I'm really excited that we're able to do this and that certain things are happening finally that are making my life even more blessed and more amazing. And I'm going to share a lot of that with all of you guys today. The second thing is going to be a little bit more profound and a little more deep, because I think it's very important that I always address the core competency, which is my dedication and focus to being a mestre of capoeira. And this week, I've had a couple of points that made me reflect on how I do things, how I think, and how people interact with me as a mestre of capoeira. Not just how I see things, but how I see people interacting with me. So let's jump into that first, and then I'll close it today with the most amazing news that I've had in a long time. Okay? Let's get started. First, what is the most important role of a mestre to a student? Or let's start even closer. Let's go. What's the most important role for a mestre to a client? The most important role for a capoeira mestre to a client is to remember that they're paying for a service. And I've gone over this 100 times. And it's been in my book, especially in Capoeira Fire. I really go deep into it. To create a quality service that the person feels comfortable coming to, and you being able to have that customer come back and that client come back to help you pay for the things you need to do as a professional capoeira. So my stuff that I'm talking about today, I'm always talking from the point of a professional capoeira mestre. And what that means is someone who lives primarily from capoeira. Secondly, we have the student. The student, what's the most important thing to the student? The student's most important goal is the physical skill, and let's say for some people, the musical and aspects and cultural aspects of capoeira. Now, why do I make that distinction? It's because a client, many times I consider someone who comes, does the capoeira, and is more interested in the physical. Let's say not 100%, but 90% physical aspect of capoeira. The student is 50-50, the physical and what else is around capoeira. Now, for the disciple of capoeira, what's the most important thing? From the mestre standpoint of view, from my standpoint of view, the thing that I'm most responsible for is the disciple, because the disciple isn't something that just starts right off the bat. It's someone that you've seen has grown over the years, and it's not just 1 year, 2 years, but someone who's seriously interested in the profoundness and the depth of capoeira. So my number one responsibility to a disciple is their growth 90% outside of the physical, because the disciple is so dedicated to capoeira that they're working 3 times as hard as the student, as the client, 2 times as hard as the student. So in a sense, they're the person working the hardest on the physical. And a lot of times it's the disciple who's thinking more about becoming the professional capoeira person. So my main responsibility as a mestre de capoeira, or as a professor, as a teacher, whatever, is the philosophical, cultural, and psychological development of a disciple. I may not be a professional psychologist, but I've been around long enough and I've done enough reading to where I feel I've developed psychologically. Now, what does that mean? It doesn't mean that I'm perfect. It doesn't mean that I'm a person who's like, oh, I'm perfect. I don't need therapy. I'm perfect, perfect, perfect. But I think we really need to be careful with a lot of people putting everything under one umbrella. We all have different paths in life. Some people do capoeira. Some people will do something else. My path is to reach a certain level of serenity, of spirituality, of psychological maturity. Let's go with the popular term of emotional intelligence. This is something that I have greatly tried to develop and to reflect within myself. And a lot of times people say, well, you can't self-analyze. And I want to say to those people, we all have different levels of understanding. It's always people who are not able to do things that criticize other people who are doing. I feel because of self-education, self-growth, the ability to reflect on what I do and to listen to important people around me, people who have good, valuable opinions that are talking to me in a constructive way so that I can be a better person are some of the aspects that have led to what I feel that I am at a certain sociological, philosophical, spiritual, cultural, I think I just said psychological, level in my life. And I've noticed that when you start to get to a certain level, that you start to look around and you realize that other people tend to be able to, how can I put this in a kind way? That some people are able to glamorize their faults or their lack of growth to make it look like growth. Some people overvalue the underachievement. And I know this sounds like I'm saying like I know everything, but it's not about whether I'm right or wrong. It's about this is my own personal opinion. I feel I've gotten to a level in my emotional intelligence that I can call out things and say, okay, people who might say, oh, this is really, this person deserves a lot of credit for getting to this point in their life. But when you're someone who's incredibly stable and at a higher point in life and with age, of course, and hopefully with understanding your experiences and growing from them, you realize that people who are the similar age are many times overvalued and they don't deserve it. You know better. For example, I guess the easiest way to explain this would be like, let's say you're a master chef or a master artist or a master musician. And then you see somebody who has practiced something really, really well, but they haven't grown musically or they don't understand like growth. Even better. So they may be able to show other people that they're so good at so few things that other people think that they're great at everything. I know it's something that's a little more deep and difficult to understand, but it's something that I really feel is important. I look at things on Instagram, TikTok, social media, and I laugh sometimes as I see the person who talks about emotional intelligence or psychological development or culture. And I realize that the person in what they're saying leaves a lot to be desired. So we always need to be careful in what we over glamorize as mentors. People will say, oh, this person is doing a really good job. That's fine if you're 30 and the person's 50. But when the person's 50 and another person, such as myself, is 52, and I look across, I mean, it doesn't matter how old they are or anything, but when you look across, you go, wait a minute. you know better that that person doesn't have that actual psychological or cultural or in simple way, emotional intelligence. And they use a lot of self things that make them seem underdeveloped emotional intelligence wise, but to the person who doesn't know any better, it sounds like they're highly developed. Again, this is my opinion. People will look at different things, but I've noticed that the people who tend to be, who speak from what I want to call a non-common sense perspective versus a real life common sense perspective. For example, I have an academia. I have rent to pay. How can I get students? How can I maintain students? How can I pay for all of this? That's common sense. I want an academia. I have no idea how I'm going to get it. I'm just going to have faith. That is not common sense. That is feeling. And a lot of times, I think the hardest thing that we're dealing with is people try to go with feelings and making themselves feel better without a good dose of common sense. And I'm not talking about anybody in particular, but I think it's really important for the point I'm about to make to understand that there's a lot of people out there who are mentoring, and I do that in quotation marks, because there's a lot of self-help gurus. There's a lot of people in capoeira that I personally know have no emotional intelligence, but their social media, they're at the one time that they're at an event, they're very good at, I consider it perfect malandro. They're able to communicate in a way that makes them look stronger emotional intelligence, when to someone who has strong emotional intelligence can see and go, okay, that's not where it should be. Recently, I watch a lot of videos in Portuguese, and I really enjoy it and I really learn a lot from it. But I'm also aware enough to look at where the information is coming from. Where is this mentorship coming from? A lot of times I like to call it a Wikipedia answer, which is basically whatever's popular at the moment. For example, a message should be spiritual, but there's no concept of what's spiritual. And what does the word mean? A message should be a leader, but there's no concept of leadership. So for me, the most important thing as a mastery is the development of the emotional intelligence. And I think emotional intelligence, how I want to use this, is philosophical, cultural, spiritual, all the aspects that I feel are important for a mastery. And people will always come back and say, well, there's different ways to do it. There's different things. I agree, but the end result is pretty obvious. If they're not getting to the end result, and I've noticed that most of the time, these type of people come up with the same way of explaining it. They create an image of where they seem to have suffered, which I'm not saying they didn't, but where it's popular to make yourself a victim and saying that your ability to overcome it is your strength. When you have finally overcome hardships, because I know I have, and everyone has different levels, but having overcome hardships in my life, it's not something I need to wear on my sleeve and remind people of every single day. When it's relevant to the conversation, I will bring up a point. But I don't bring up past things to make myself look like, I almost drowned, but I learned to swim by myself. Everyone did that. If you didn't drown in life, then you're learning to swim. How good you learn to swim is to each person. But at the end of the day, there's only certain people who will be able to go on to be successful. And I'm talking about the success of emotional intelligence. As a mentor, I try not to reflect on, whenever I speak to somebody about capoeira or spiritual growth or philosophical growth, I always tell them that, here's an experience in my life. Maybe you can reflect on that. This is what I got from it. I never say, well, I went through this and we all have, people make so many excuses for not being excellent. And that's fine. Again, I always tell my boys, not everyone is an Einstein, and we have the whole spectrum. People can be different levels of different things. But I deal with a lot of people who are at the high end of what I want to call success. People who are bankers, lawyers, doctors, highly educated people all the time around me. And it's not easy to use smoke and mirrors of my degree to say I know more or I've done this. It's actually people who are intelligent, highly contemplative, and high emotional intelligence. And I'm going to finish this point with what I want to say is a easy indicator. And I'm going to start it off with something Mestre Vibes always used to tell me years ago. Said, in the capoeira world, that at the mastery level, and I'm saying what he's saying, so you can take it for whatever you want. Says, I don't consider you a foreign capoeirista. I consider you like part of the Brazilian capoeira community. Says, within that community, there are so few masters that are in healthy relationships. Let me tell you why this is important. I'm not talking about individual people's feelings. Not everyone needs to get married right now. The marriage rate is very low. But guys, in the real world, in the common sense world, developing whether you're married to a same-sex partner or to a person of the opposite sex, or if you're in a long-term, healthy, stable relationship, that is something all around the world. And at the higher levels of society, if you are not able, or your ability to be in a stable relationship directly equates for the last 10,000 years with your ability of emotional intelligence. If you are not in a healthy relationship, you are saying, I cannot coexist with someone else. And you can say, well, everyone's different. That's fine. But the people who know, look at any highly successful person, they're all married. If they're divorced, it's after a certain level. I'm not talking about the outliers like Jeff Bezos or all those people. I'm talking about the people from, the higher you go, people tend to be more conservative in relationships, not in sexuality, in relationships. I have a friend who I've known for 30 years. He's been in a 25-year relationship with his partner. And these two guys are like so emotionally intelligent that sometimes I fail in comparison. So the ability, for example, for me, if I meet somebody and they're like, capoeira this, capoeira that, emotional intelligence this, and I go, okay, if you're not in a healthy relationship, at a certain point, people around you subconsciously or consciously will not take you serious to a certain level. Sorry, I said it. It is what it is. But at the end of the day, any company, any social group, any fraternity, anything, if you're not in a healthy relationship, people don't have a certain level of trust with you. I'm sure people will say other things, but I'm talking about my experience and the people around me. I'm able to call people to charity events, people who can do whatever they want because they have access to wealth, but they come and support me because they also understand my emotional intelligence. They're not going to waste their time. Mentorship as a mastery is also to help develop the social, psychological, cultural, philosophical, and spiritual education equaling the emotional intelligence of a disciple. You should try to do this for all your students. There's only so many hours in a day, but this week is something I really thought about and I really wanted to share with all of you. It's a process, but people, at the end of the day, everybody, what I always get is, like, I'll bring it back to the simple thing when it comes to like music in art in Japan. The top 5% in America we consider professional. Let's say in music, they're the people who are living from music. Then there's the hobby people who might be pretty good at what they do. Of course, they're the outliers who are professional level, but they don't do it professionally. I'm talking about the general, because what I really do get tired when people talk about outliers. Like, well, I know one person. Like, that doesn't make it a standard. I'm talking about 35 years of experience in capoeira, and generally it's the same consistency. Let's talk about the importance of emotional intelligence more in capoeira. It's something that I feel is really important. And if we start to talk about that, people are going to start to lose their rosy glasses with a lot of people, I think. Day to day, what does their master, what does their mentor do for them to help them grow? Are they there? Do they reflect? Do they tell them? If you have a mentor, it should affect, in a positive way, your growth. Okay, guys, I don't want to get into it anymore. You can ask me questions later. Now, let's jump into something incredibly positive, as this podcast is getting really, really long. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks especially to my Patreon supporters that I'm able to do this podcast. And more importantly, my Patreon supporters support everything I do as an artist, community activist, and cultural entrepreneur. For 20 years, I've been wanting to do a Brazilian day that I was able to produce and direct. Coming soon, guys. Information on Mestre Sucuri's first Brazilian Day festival. I found the space. It is 15 minutes from my academia by bicycle. It is amazing. And I have more details coming soon. I've already got a couple of DJs and bands. And I will tell you guys the dates as soon as I'm able to confirm everything, which might be by the end of today. Brazil Day for us, Mestre Sucuri 2024. More information coming soon. Thank you again, everybody, for listening. I hope that what I say triggers people in a positive way. Thanks for listening. Lots of love, lots of peace, and lots of capoeira. Mestre Sucuri, episode 54, Mestre Vibes podcast.